I'm David Cole, 32 years old. Lead software architect at TechBound, a company I built from the ground up, a company that had just been on the verge of selling for $450 million. Or at least, that's what I thought. The office buzzed with its usual tech-driven energy when I walked in, my laptop under my arm, carrying the weight of a presentation I had spent the last month perfecting. I didn't expect today to be any different from the others. But it was. And it wouldn't just change my career, it would change everything. The moment I stepped into the conference room, the air shifted. Eleanor Chase, the newly appointed CEO, was sitting at the head of the table. She looked up, but her eyes barely acknowledged my presence. The other executives sat in stiff silence, waiting. And that's when it hit me. She was about to drop the hammer. "David," she said, her voice clipped, "you're fired." I froze. The words didn't register at first. Fired? I built TechBound. I was the one who architected the AI system that had become the heart of the company's deal with Brightstone Corporation. Without my work, they wouldn't even have a product to sell. I was indispensable. Or at least I thought I was. Effective immediately, she added, as if the sentence wasn't already etched in my brain. We're going in a new direction. My mouth went dry. A new direction? What the hell was she talking about? I stared at her, trying to keep my composure, but inside, a storm was brewing. Pack your things, David, she said, standing up from the chair, her eyes now fixed on the laptop in front of her. I'll handle the rest. I'm going to need you to leave the building now. I opened my mouth to protest, but the words got stuck. I didn't understand. Why was she doing this? Why now, with the deal so close to being finalized? But it was the next thing she did that made my blood run cold. With a single motion, Eleanor reached over to my laptop, opened a terminal window, and started typing. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with an ease that suggested she had already planned this. She hit enter, and then, in an instant, she deleted my code. The code that was the backbone of TechBound's future. I stood there, paralyzed, as the room went quiet. Everyone was watching, but no one said a word. I felt the walls of the room close in on me. My heart pounded in my chest as I glanced at the screen, watching my life's work evaporate in front of my eyes. There was no turning back. It was gone. The door swung open behind me, and Maxwell Brooks, the lead investor from Brightstone Corp., stepped inside. His expression was unreadable, but I could see the tension in his posture. He took one look at the screen, then at me. This is your doing? He asked Eleanor, his tone colder than I'd ever heard it. I've made a decision, Eleanor said, her voice firm. We need a leaner company, and we're starting now. A beat of silence passed before Maxwell spoke again, this time his gaze shifting toward me. We were supposed to close the deal in 48 hours, David. But now? I don't know if that's possible. This could kill the entire acquisition. I didn't have the words. I couldn't even breathe. My mind raced, trying to process the betrayal. Maxwell wasn't surprised, though. He was in on it. This whole thing, the firing, the deletion, the deal with Brightstone, it was all orchestrated. And I had no idea why. Maxwell's eyes narrowed. I'll be in touch, he said curtly, turning toward the door. He paused just before leaving. David, I think you should know something. Eleanor is not the one calling the shots. Not anymore. The door slammed shut, leaving me standing there, shattered. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. My mind was spinning. It felt like I was suffocating in plain sight, a victim of a game I hadn't even known I was playing. I grabbed my bag, still in a daze, and walked out of the room without a word. The hallway seemed endless as I made my way toward the exit. I could hear my footsteps echoing, each step reminding me of the life I had just lost. The future I had been promised was slipping away. As I stepped out into the parking lot, the cool air hit me like a slap. I looked down at my phone. A text from Maxwell, call me when you get a chance. It's urgent. I didn't know what to think, but something in my gut told me that the worst was yet to come. The deal with Brightstone? It was already collapsing. But that wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. I took a deep breath and dialed his number. "I'm listening," I said. His voice on the other end was a razor-sharp whisper. "You have to decide quickly, David. There's still a chance to save this, but you'll have to act fast. Eleanor's playing a game she thinks she can win. But we both know it's a game of destruction." The knot in my stomach tightened. "What's really going on, Maxwell?" He didn't hesitate. "The question is, are you going to be the pawn or the one who moves the pieces?" I didn't answer. Not yet. But as I stared at my phone, one thought dominated my mind. I was done playing by the rules. The question now was, how far would I go to take control back? I couldn't breathe. The air outside felt thick, suffocating, as if the whole city was holding its breath along with me. I stared at the glowing phone in my hand, Maxwell's name lighting up the screen. I shouldn't answer. It would make me a pawn, right? But what choice did I have? The game was already in motion. I swiped the screen, my finger trembling. "David, I hope you're still with us. You're going to want to hear this." Maxwell's voice was cold, sharp, but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. Anticipation, maybe. He knew something I didn't. "Tell me what the hell is going on, Maxwell," I said, my voice low, tense. Maxwell didn't waste time. "You're not the only one who knows the stakes, David. Eleanor is not playing by the rules. And neither am I. This game is bigger than any of us." I could hear the rustling of papers, the faint hum of a busy office behind him. I hated the way he spoke, like everything was just a transaction. "What are you asking me to do?" "Meet me," he said simply. "I'll tell you everything, but you need to come alone. There's something you're missing, something Eleanor doesn't know I've already figured out." I didn't want to go. I didn't trust him. But deep down, I knew he was right. There was something wrong. Eleanor's actions didn't add up, and my gut told me I was missing a piece of the puzzle. Something bigger. Maybe Maxwell had it. I didn't answer immediately, but the feeling in my chest grew heavier. If I didn't go, everything would continue spiraling out of control. The deal, the company, my life, gone. "I'll be there," I said, hanging up before I could second-guess myself. The cafe Maxwell chose was small, tucked away on a corner in a part of the city I hadn't visited in years. The kind of place where you can feel the quiet hum of secrets being traded behind every smile. It was dark inside, the air thick with the smell of espresso and stale paper. The low clink of ceramic cups echoed in the otherwise silent room. I saw him immediately. He was sitting at a table near the back, sipping his coffee, his eyes scanning the room in a way that made me feel like I was being watched even before I stepped inside. Maxwell didn't look at me as I approached, but I could feel his gaze crawl over me. The predator sizing up its prey. I slid into the chair across from him, my hands clenched into fists under the table. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice lower than I intended. Maxwell placed his coffee cup down with exaggerated care, his fingers lingering on the rim for a moment too long. "You're smart, David. Too smart for your own good. Eleanor's playing both sides, and it's going to destroy everything. The deal, the company, all of it." I leaned forward, my pulse quickening. "You're telling me Eleanor isn't what she seems?" Maxwell smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Not in the slightest. The truth is, he was cut off by the sound of his phone ringing. He glanced at it but didn't answer. The tension in the room spiked. I could feel the undercurrent of danger, like we were both teetering on the edge of something much larger than we realized. "Who is it?" I asked, even though I didn't really want to know. "Doesn't matter." He pushed the phone away and focused back on me. "What matters is this, the deal with Brightstone Corp is already dead in the water. I know what Eleanor's planning, and it's not going to be pretty. She's been manipulating everything, David. You're just collateral damage. I wanted to punch him, but something about his calm demeanor made me hesitate. Maxwell wasn't scared. He was in control. Why should I trust you? I asked, trying to mask the growing doubt gnawing at me. Because you have no choice, he replied coolly. Do you think Eleanor would hesitate to destroy everything you've worked for? She's already deleted your code. Now she wants to erase your future. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. How did he know that? He must have been watching me, following me. But why? There's more, Maxwell continued. Eleanor is not just playing for power. She has a personal vendetta. A history with the founder of TechBound. This whole acquisition? It's part of something far darker. You were never meant to be part of the future she's creating. And neither is TechBound. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of his words pressing down on me. What's her endgame? What does she want? Maxwell glanced over his shoulder, then leaned in closer. Revenge, he said quietly. On the company. On TechBound's founder. On everyone who's ever stood in her way. My heart pounded in my chest as the truth began to unravel. And you? What's your role in this? I asked, my voice tight. He smiled again, but this time, it felt more like a threat. I'm the one who's going to make sure Brightstone walks away with the prize. If you want to keep your head above water, you'll help me make that happen. I stood up abruptly. I don't trust you, Maxwell. Doesn't matter, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You'll come around. But if you don't, you'll find yourself drowning with the rest of them. I turned to leave, but as I stepped toward the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I glanced around the cafe, but it was empty, save for a few customers in the corner. Still, I couldn't shake the sensation that eyes were following my every move. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the cool night air. I barely made it 2 steps before I heard a sound behind me, the footsteps. Someone was following me. I turned around sharply, but the street was empty. For a brief moment, I considered running. But the truth, that gnawing, overwhelming truth, hit me like a ton of bricks. I was already in the game. There was no escaping it now. As I walked briskly toward my car, the cold wind biting at my face, one thought haunted me: the deal was dead. But this wasn't just about business anymore. This was about survival. And I didn't know if I was going to make it out alive. I didn't sleep that night. The hum of my apartment felt louder than usual, the silence suffocating. I could feel the weight of everything crashing down on me. Eleanor's betrayal still burned in my chest, and Maxwell's words echoed in my mind. Are you going to be the pawn or the one who moves the pieces? I spent hours going over the code she deleted. Pieces of it were still etched in my memory, but the rest was gone, disappeared. It was all I had left, and now it was nothing. If I didn't find a way to recover it, everything would collapse. But there was more at play here. Something bigger. I had to understand what Eleanor was really doing, why she was hell-bent on ruining everything, and why Maxwell was so eager to control the wreckage. It wasn't just business, it was personal. The first thing I did the next morning was track down Olivia Taylor. She had been a senior engineer at TechBound for years, but after the acquisition talks with Brightstone Corp began, she'd mysteriously disappeared. I hadn't heard from her since, but something told me she knew more about what was going on than anyone else. She answered on the second ring. David? Olivia, it's me. I need to talk to you. There was a long pause before she spoke again. This isn't the best time. Meet me, I demanded. There's no time left. I know you're involved in this, I just don't know how. I could practically hear her weighing her options on the other end. Finally, she relented. Fine. The usual place. An hour. I hung up before I could second-guess myself. The cafe where we met was the kind of place that looked like it belonged in a movie, a dimly lit corner booth with a window view of the city streets. Coffee cups sat untouched on the table, a slight steam rising in the cool morning air. Olivia didn't look like I remembered. She looked worn, like someone who had been dragged through the mud and didn't have the strength to climb out. Her eyes were dark, and there were deep lines around her mouth that hadn't been there before. "I didn't think you'd come," she said, her voice quiet, almost as if she didn't want anyone to hear. "You don't get to disappear now, Olivia," I said, sitting across from her. "Not after everything that's happened. You owe me answers." She swallowed, looking around before leaning in closer. "You have to understand something, David. What's happening now, it's not just about Techbound. It's about revenge. Eleanor didn't just come out of nowhere. She has a personal vendetta." "Revenge? On who?" "On Techbound's founder," Olivia said, her voice barely a whisper. "And on you. You're part of this, whether you want to be or not." I sat back, trying to digest the information. "What does that mean?" "She's not just trying to take the company," Olivia continued. "She's trying to erase everything the company stood for. Your work, David. The AI patents, the data systems, everything. It's all a tool in her hands now. And if you don't do something about it, you'll lose everything. Not just the company, but your future. Your life." I felt my stomach tighten. "But why me?" Olivia hesitated, looking over her shoulder as if she was expecting someone to walk in at any moment. "I've seen the files, David. There's a reason Brightstone is so interested in Techbound. It's not just about the company's value. They need what you built, and Eleanor knows it. She's going to destroy it. The question is, are you going to let her?" The weight of her words hit me like a punch in the gut. "You're saying she's trying to destroy everything I worked for? Everything I've built?" Olivia nodded grimly. "Yes. And she'll do it without a second thought. She's already got a plan to sell off the pieces, and you're the last piece she needs to complete the puzzle. If you don't stop her, this company will implode." I could feel the walls closing in, the tension thick in the air. There was so much I didn't understand, but I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't just about business anymore. It was about survival. "Do you know where she's keeping the backup data?" I asked, my voice low. Olivia shook her head. "You're not going to find it that easily. But there's a way to get to it. You just need to play her game." "How?" She met my gaze, her eyes flashing with something I hadn't seen before, the fear. "You've already done it. You've already played into her hands. That's how she's been getting away with it all, by making you think you have no choice. But you do. You always have." The realization hit me like a lightning bolt. Eleanor had been manipulating me this whole time. From the moment she fired me, to her smug deletion of my code, it was all part of a plan. A plan that I had unknowingly walked into. But there was still one thing I needed to know: what exactly was Eleanor's endgame? And what role did Maxwell play in it? I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Olivia didn't flinch, but I could see the anxiety written across her face. "You've done your part," I said. "Now it's time for me to do mine." "David, don't," Olivia started, but I was already walking away. Outside, the streets of San Francisco were bustling, people rushing in all directions, oblivious to the battle that was playing out in the shadows. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, my mind racing. There was no going back now. I was already in too deep. The clock was ticking, and every second I wasted brought me closer to losing everything. I turned the corner, only to freeze in my tracks. Across the street, I saw a familiar face, Maxwell Brooks, standing in front of a sleek black car, his eyes fixed on me. I couldn't help but wonder if he had been watching me all along. I couldn't trust anyone. But if I didn't act now, there wouldn't be a chance to fix it. I started walking toward him, my heart pounding in my chest. The game had just gotten a whole lot more dangerous. I had no choice but to face Maxwell. Standing across the street, his figure outlined in the streetlight, it felt like he was waiting for me, his eyes cold and calculating. The knot in my stomach tightened as I walked toward him. I hated that I was walking toward him. But I knew if I didn't, this whole thing would spiral out of control faster than I could keep up with. "You're looking worse for wear," Maxwell said, his voice dripping with a strange amusement. "I thought you'd be more resilient. But here we are." I didn't respond. He knew I was too deep in this now to turn back. His smirk said it all. "You've been watching me," I said flatly. "How long?" "Long enough," he replied, taking a slow drag from a cigarette. The smoke swirled in the cold night air like some twisted metaphor for what was happening to me. "I knew you'd eventually come to your senses. I'm not here to hurt you, David. I'm here to offer you a choice." I hated the sound of that. A choice. But it wasn't really a choice, was it? "I'm listening," I said, forcing the words out. Maxwell stepped closer, his hands in his pockets. "Eleanor thinks she's playing the game, but she's not. She's only a pawn. Brightstone is after something bigger. They want the tech you created. They want it bad. And you're here to—" "What? Help me?" I scoffed, the bitterness rising in my throat. "I don't need your help." He raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because last I checked, you're about to watch everything you've worked for go up in smoke. Unless—" He trailed off, letting the silence stretch out between us. "Unless what?" I spat. "Unless you help me take her down. If we both play our cards right, we can still walk away with Techbound intact. Brightstone will pay, and you'll get what's rightfully yours." I stepped back, shaking my head. "And what do you get out of this, Maxwell? You're not a saint. You don't do favors." A flicker of something darker passed over his face. "Money. Power. Control. You know, the usual. But I'm also trying to keep this from going off the rails. If you don't act, things will only get uglier. And you'll be caught in the middle." I clenched my fists. His words hit harder than any punch. "You think I don't know that? I'm already in the middle. And I'm not sure I trust you enough to drag me deeper." Maxwell smirked. "It's not about trust. It's about survival." There was a cold, cruel logic to his words. He was right. If I didn't act, I'd lose everything, including my future. I knew this was the moment, the point of no return. Everything that had come before this was a build-up to this exact choice. Maxwell saw the conflict on my face and leaned in closer. "You've been played, David. I'm not the one you need to be worried about. The bigger game is just beginning, and you need to be on the winning side." I met his gaze, trying to read him, but it was impossible. He was a master of manipulation, and I was too deep in the mess to see the full picture. "The files Eleanor deleted?" I asked suddenly, the thought hitting me like a freight train. "Where are they?" Maxwell's eyes narrowed. "That's what you need to figure out. The backup's encrypted. Eleanor's smart, but she didn't count on you being resourceful. I'm telling you this now, you're going to need to access Techbound servers before anyone else does. If she beats you to it, everything's gone. Including you." A sick feeling rose in my stomach. "Why help me now?" "Because you have leverage," Maxwell said with a grin. "You think I'm the only one pulling strings here? The real game is much bigger. And we both know what's at stake." I wanted to tell him to go to hell. But I didn't. I couldn't. I needed answers. Techbound wasn't just a company. It was my legacy. And Eleanor had just shattered it. "I'll do it," I said, my voice low and final. "But don't think for a second that this means I trust you." Maxwell chuckled darkly. "You're still playing catch-up. You'll see, David. In the end, the only thing that matters is winning." I left Maxwell standing there, his figure swallowed by the night as I made my way to my car. The streets of San Francisco were eerily quiet, the city's usual energy now replaced by a heavy tension I couldn't shake. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every noise felt like a warning. I reached my car, fumbling for my keys, the weight of the decision pressing on me. What had I just agreed to? I had no idea what the next move was, but I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't let Eleanor win. Not after everything she had done. As I started the engine, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Olivia. "David, I don't think you realize how deep you're in. Watch your back. Eleanor's watching you." I froze. The words hit harder than I expected. How did she know? How had she found out? I turned off the car, my hand suddenly shaking as I checked my rearview mirror. A black SUV was parked across the street, the headlights off but the engine running. It was too close. The same car I'd seen a few nights ago. I wasn't alone. Someone was following me. And I didn't know who I could trust anymore. I parked a few blocks away from the building, my hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. The city's skyline loomed in front of me, but all I could focus on was the feeling that something was closing in. Eleanor. Maxwell. Brightstone. They were all pieces in a game that I didn't fully understand, but it was clear now that they were all connected. I had to move fast, or I'd be buried beneath it all. The moment I stepped out of the car, I felt it. Someone was watching me. I could feel their eyes on my back as I walked toward the entrance of the building. The sound of my footsteps echoed in the empty street, and the cold wind bit at my skin, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I glanced over my shoulder. The street behind me was still, the shadows long and unforgiving, but I couldn't see anyone. Whoever it was, if there even was anyone, was good. Too good. Inside the lobby, the sterile hum of the fluorescent lights did nothing to calm the unease gnawing at my gut. I headed straight for the elevator, my eyes scanning the faces of the few employees scattered across the room. They didn't look up, didn't seem to notice me at all. But I knew something was off. Eleanor was moving pieces on the board, and she wasn't alone. I pressed the button for the 20th floor. The elevator hummed to life, the smooth motion of its descent somehow unsettling. As the numbers ticked up, my mind raced. The code. The deleted files. Brightstone's interest. I was close. Too close to back out now. The doors opened with a soft chime, and I stepped out, my eyes immediately falling on the security guard sitting at the desk. He barely looked up from his phone, but I could see the tension in his posture. He wasn't as oblivious as he appeared. As I walked past him, I caught a glimpse of something that stopped me cold, a small, square envelope lying on the edge of the desk. It had no markings, no return address. I wasn't supposed to stop. I wasn't supposed to waste time, but my instincts told me something was off. Something was waiting for me. I picked up the envelope, turned it over in my hands. The moment I opened it, a small slip of paper fell out. I unfolded it. You're too late. Eleanor's already 2 steps ahead. She'll destroy everything. You can't stop it. My heart skipped a beat. The handwriting was familiar. Too familiar. Olivia. It took me a second to regain my composure. This wasn't a warning. It was a challenge. Eleanor was already moving the pieces on the board. But how? What had I missed? And where did Olivia fit into this? I shoved the note into my pocket, my pulse pounding in my ears. I had no choice now but to move forward. I turned and walked toward the elevator, ignoring the guard as he glanced up for the briefest moment. I couldn't let them see me flinch, couldn't let them know that I was questioning every step I was taking. I hit the button for the 30th floor. The doors closed with a soft hiss. By the time I reached Eleanor's office, my mind was racing. I had to confront her. I had to know why she was doing this. Was this all part of a bigger plan? Or was she just out for herself? The door to her office was ajar, and I pushed it open without knocking. She was standing by the window, looking out over the city, her profile sharp against the dim light. Her back was to me, but I could feel her awareness of my presence, like an electric current in the air. "David," she said without turning around. "I thought you'd come." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Her voice was calm, too calm, like she had already won. "You've been a fool to trust me. But then again, you've always been a pawn in this game. A useful one, but a pawn, nonetheless." The words hit harder than I expected. I had trusted her. I had believed that we were on the same side. And now, standing here, everything seemed like a lie. "Why?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Why destroy everything? Why destroy me?" Eleanor turned, her eyes cold. "Because I can." She walked toward me slowly, her gaze never leaving mine. "You've spent years building this empire, David. But you didn't see what was in front of you. You didn't see the bigger picture. Brightstone has been pulling the strings for months, and now, it's time for you to watch it all burn." I could feel my heart race as the pieces started to fall into place. She wasn't just manipulating the company. She was manipulating me. "You're not going to get away with this," I said, my fists clenching at my sides. "The deal's already dead. You've already lost." Her lips curled into a smile. "No, David. You've lost. It's already done. The backup data's gone. The code you were so proud of? Deleted. Everything you built? Gone. There's nothing left for you to save." I shook my head, disbelief mixing with rage. "You don't have control here anymore." "Brightstone." "Brightstone," she interrupted, her smile widening. "You think they were ever in charge of this? They're just the next step. You're out of your league, David. You always have been." My stomach dropped. Something was wrong. Everything I thought I knew was wrong. And then the truth hit me like a ton of bricks. "Maxwell," I whispered. "You and Maxwell. You've been working together this whole time." Eleanor's smile didn't falter. "Not working together. Maxwell was never meant to be anything more than a tool. Just like you." Suddenly, I felt the ground slip out from under me. Maxwell had been the one pulling all the strings. Not for control. Not for money. But for something darker. Something personal. I had been played. Before I could process the weight of her words, a sharp knock interrupted the moment. The door swung open, and I turned to see Maxwell himself standing in the doorway, a smug expression on his face. "You finally figured it out," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "But you're too late." I could feel the walls closing in. The game was over. Or maybe it had just begun. The air was thick with tension, the weight of the last few hours pressing down on me like a ton of bricks. I stood in the empty conference room, staring at Eleanor and Maxwell. The city outside the window seemed a world away, the lights of San Francisco flickering like distant stars, and different to the storm brewing inside this room. Maxwell leaned against the wall, arms crossed, that all too familiar smirk still plastered on his face. Eleanor was sitting at the table, her eyes cold and calculating. For a moment, I wondered if she'd ever been human, or if she was just a machine built to destroy everything in her path. I could feel the truth coming closer, but the closer I got, the more elusive it became. "You think you've won," I said, my voice steady, but my insides were anything but calm. "But you haven't. You can't just erase what I've built. You can't control everything forever." Eleanor's laugh was icy, the sound of a predator toying with its prey. "You've always been naive, David. You think this is about the code? About the company? No. This is bigger than that." She stood, walking slowly toward me, each step measured, like a lion circling its kill. "This is about power. About who holds it. About who gets to decide what the world will look like." I gritted my teeth. "You're wrong. It's not about power. It's about the people who believe in what you've built. People like me, who work for something greater than themselves. She stopped in front of me, her eyes locking onto mine. You still don't get it. You never did. Her voice softened, but there was no warmth in it. You're not the hero in this story, David. You never were. You were always just a tool. A piece of the puzzle that I had to remove to get to the bigger picture. A shiver ran down my spine. For a moment, I felt like I was drowning, trapped in a world where everything I believed in was a lie. But then something inside me snapped. I wasn't just a tool. I wasn't just a pawn in their game. I was the architect. The one who had built this, and I'd be damned if I let them tear it down. No, I said firmly, taking a step forward. I'm done being your pawn. And you're right about one thing, you've been playing a bigger game. But now I'm in control. Maxwell's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. This, I said, holding it up. This is the backup. Everything you thought was deleted? It's here. Every line of code. Every file you thought you erased. It's all here, and now it's mine. Eleanor's expression faltered for a brief moment before she recovered, her mask of confidence slipping for just a second. You think you can win? You think you can just take everything back? I'm not trying to win, I replied, my voice cold. I'm just trying to make sure you lose. The silence in the room was deafening. I could see the wheels turning in their minds, but they both knew there was no way out of this now. I had them cornered, and they knew it. Maxwell pushed off the wall and took a step forward, his posture suddenly tense. You think you're safe, David? You think this is over? I know it's over, I said, my voice unwavering. The truth always comes out in the end. Eleanor's smile was the only thing left that hadn't changed. It was empty. Cold. You think the truth will save you? The truth is just a weapon, David. And you've just handed it to me. Before I could react, Eleanor reached for the phone on the table and dialed a number. Her eyes never left mine as she spoke. Yes, it's time. A few moments later, the door opened, and a group of men in suits entered. They were too clean-cut, too perfect. And I knew exactly what that meant. Looks like you've got company, Maxwell said, his voice dripping with smug satisfaction. You really thought you could just walk away from this? I didn't have time to react. They were already moving toward me, closing in, the walls of the room feeling smaller with each step. But then, as the men in suits closed the gap, something unexpected happened. The door burst open again. This time, it was Olivia, standing in the doorway, her face set in a grim expression. She didn't hesitate. Without a word, she pulled out a gun and pointed it directly at the men advancing toward me. Step back, Olivia said, her voice steady, unwavering. I'm not going to let you destroy him. For a long moment, no one moved. The tension in the air was palpable. Everything we'd fought for, everything we'd lost, was hanging in the balance. You've made a mistake, Maxwell said, stepping forward. But Olivia didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. This is my mistake to make, she replied, her eyes fixed on Maxwell. And I'll make sure it's the last one. The standoff felt like it lasted a lifetime, but in the end, it wasn't the guns or the threats that decided the outcome. It was the truth. The truth that Maxwell and Eleanor couldn't control, no matter how hard they tried. In the end, the walls they'd built crumbled. The game was over. But the cost of victory? It was higher than I'd ever imagined. A few weeks later, I stood in the same conference room, staring at the empty chairs. Techbound had been saved, but I knew things would never be the same. The people I'd once trusted were gone. The company was mine now, but I had a feeling I wouldn't be alone for long. The truth always comes out in the end. And when it does, it doesn't just set you free. It forces you to rebuild everything from the ground up. I was ready for that. Because in the end, that's all any of us can do. Keep rebuilding. Keep moving forward. No matter how many times the game changes. The only thing that truly matters is how you play. And who you choose to be.